The cafe was packed when Rachel walked in, her left hand prominently displayed so everyone could see the ring, my grandmother's ring. She slid into the seat across from me, a smirk playing on her perfectly painted lips. "Thanks for meeting me, Olivia," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I wanted you to be the first to know Daniel and I are getting married." My stomach churned at the mention of my ex-husband's name, but I kept my expression neutral. Rachel had always been like this, taking everything that was mine from childhood toys to prom dates. But this time she'd gone too far. "Congratulations," I said, wrapping my hands around my coffee cup to stop them from shaking. "I see you're wearing Grandmother Eleanor's ring." She held up her hand, letting the antique diamond catch the light. "Of this old thing. Well, since Daniel helped me contest the will, technically it's mine now, along with the house and the trust fund." Her smile widened. "It's funny how things work out, isn't it?" I thought about the last conversation I'd had with Grandmother Eleanor just days before she passed. We'd been in her study, surrounded by her beloved books and antiques, when she'd handed me an old leather journal. "Keep this safe," she'd whispered, her voice weak but urgent. "Everything you need to know is in here. Promise me to wait until the right moment." I promised, tucking the journal away without reading it. Now, watching Rachel flaunt her stolen inheritance, I wondered if this was the moment Grandmother had been waiting for. "You know what's really funny?" Rachel continued, stirring her latte with obvious pleasure. "How easy it was to convince the lawyers that you were mentally unstable. A few tearful statements from Daniel about your episodes during your marriage, some carefully edited photos." She shrugged. "The judge practically handed everything over." My hands tightened around my cup. The episodes Rachel mentioned were panic attacks I had after discovering Daniel's affairs, including, I now realized, with my own sister. They used my lowest moments against me, twisted my pain into a weapon. "Why did you ask me here, Rachel?" I kept my voice steady, remembering the weight of Grandmother's journal in my bag. "Just to gloat?" "Oh no, dear sister." She leaned forward, dropping her voice. "I wanted to offer you a deal. Sign away any future claims to the estate, and I'll give you a small monthly allowance. Just enough to keep you from ending up on the streets." She sat back, clearly pleased with herself. "After all, we are family." I thought about the journal, about Grandmother's final words, about the secret I discovered last night when I finally opened those weathered pages. "You're right," I said, reaching for my bag. "We are family, and there's something you should know about Grandmother's real estate." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "We've been through all the paperwork. Everything's in my name now." I pulled out the journal, its leather cover worn with age. "Not everything. Did you know Grandmother kept a second set of books?" For the first time, Rachel's confident smile faltered. "What?" "She was quite meticulous," I continued, opening the journal. "Every transaction, every property, every investment, all documented here, including some interesting transfers made just before she died." "You're lying," Rachel snapped, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "The lawyers found everything." "Did they?" I slid a stack of papers across the table, copies I had made from the journal's most important pages. Because according to this, Grandmother's most valuable assets were moved into a separate trust 2 weeks before she passed. A trust that requires both sisters to agree on any distribution of funds. Rachel's face paled as she scanned the documents. I could almost see her mind racing, calculating what this meant. "That's impossible," she whispered, but her hands were shaking now. "Daniel checked everything," he said. "Daniel doesn't know about this," I cut in. "Neither do the lawyers. Grandmother made sure of that. She knew how you both operated. She was just waiting to see how far you'd go." "You're bluffing," Rachel said, but her voice had lost its edge. "These could be forged." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized. "Why don't we ask Mr. Liu? He's the trustee Grandmother appointed. I'm sure he'd be happy to verify everything." Rachel's composure cracked completely. "Wait," she said quickly, reaching for my phone. Let's discuss this." I ended the call before it connected, enjoying the flash of realization in her eyes. "Oh, now you want to talk? What happened to all that confidence from earlier?" "Olivia, please," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't understand. Daniel and we've already spent some of the money. We've made commitments." "I understand perfectly," I replied, gathering my things. You and my ex-husband conspired to steal my inheritance by painting me as mentally unstable. You used my trust against me, just like you always have. What do you want? Rachel asked, the question coming out more like a plea than a demand. I stood up, looking down at my sister, really looking at her for the first time in years. Behind the perfect makeup and designer clothes, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. What I want, I said quietly, is for you to think about what's going to happen when Daniel finds out there's no money left to steal. When he realizes that marrying you won't give him access to grandmother's fortune after all. The color drained from Rachel's face. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? I smiled, remembering all the times she'd taken what was mine, all the times she'd hurt me without consequence. I think it's time for both of you to learn what it feels like to lose everything. I turned to leave, but Rachel's voice stopped me. He'll leave me, she said, her words barely audible. If he finds out about this, he'll leave me. Probably, I agreed, not turning around, just like he left me when he thought something better came along. Funny how history repeats itself, isn't it? As I walked out of the cafe, I could feel Rachel's eyes on me, could almost hear her mind racing to find a way out of the trap she'd set for herself. But this time there was no escape. This time justice would finally be served. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls and dozens of text messages from both Rachel and Daniel. I ignored them all, instead focusing on the next phase of my plan. Grandmother's journal had revealed more than just the secret trust. It had shown me exactly how to dismantle the lies they'd built. I drove to the law offices of Liu and Associates, the leather journal secure in my bag. Mr. Liu, a small man with kind eyes and steel-gray hair, was waiting for me. Miss Olivia, he said, rising from behind his desk. Your grandmother spoke of you often. She would be proud to see you now. I placed the journal on his desk. Did she tell you what they might try to do? He nodded gravely. Eleanor was very perceptive. She knew your sister's nature, and she had concerns about your ex-husband's intentions even before your divorce. That's why she created the second trust. Precisely. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Everything of real value, the investment portfolios, the commercial properties, the art collection. It's all here, protected. What your sister and Daniel managed to steal through the courts was essentially a shell. I thought about Rachel's smug face at the cafe, about Daniel's confident testimony painting me as unstable. They don't know they've been playing with an empty hand this whole time. No, Mr. Liu confirmed, a slight smile touching his lips. And now that they've shown their true colors, we can proceed with the rest of Eleanor's plan. My phone buzzed again, Daniel this time. I silenced it without looking at the message. How long before they figure it out? The quarterly statements go out next week. Once they try to access the accounts, Mr. Liu spread his hands. Well, let's just say it will be an enlightening experience. I spent the next few days in careful preparation while Rachel and Daniel grew increasingly desperate in their attempts to contact me. I met with bankers, real estate agents, and investment advisors. Each meeting revealed another layer of grandmother's brilliance. She hadn't just protected her assets. She created a framework for exposing every lie, every manipulation Rachel and Daniel had used against me. The evidence was all there, meticulously documented. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Olivia. It was Daniel's mother, Catherine. Please, we need to talk. Rachel's hysterical, and Daniel won't tell me what's going on. I closed my eyes, remembering how Catherine had testified against me during the estate hearing, claiming she'd always known there was something wrong with that girl. I'm sorry, Catherine, I said, not feeling sorry at all. But I think it's best if they explain the situation to you themselves. I'm sure they can tell you all about how they conspired to steal my inheritance. But the money, she started. What about it? They already spent quite a bit, she said, her voice tight with worry. The new house, the cars, the engagement party next week. Olivia, surely we can work something out. I thought about the engagement party they'd planned at the country club, the same club where Daniel and I had gotten married 6 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. You know what's interesting, Catherine? When Daniel and I were married, you told me family was everything, that loyalty and honesty were the foundations of a lasting relationship. I pause, letting the words sink in. I wonder what you'll say when you find out how your son and my sister betrayed those values. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What do you mean? She finally asked. Ask them about the photos they doctored. Ask about the false testimony, the manufactured evidence they used to paint me as unstable. Better yet, ask them about the affair they were having while Daniel and I were still married. I heard her sharp intake of breath. No, she whispered. They wouldn't. They did, I said simply. And now they're about to learn that actions have consequences. After hanging up, I drove to grandmother's house, my house now, though Rachel didn't know that yet. The Grand Victorian stood silent and dignified, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun. I used my key to enter, breathing in the familiar scent of old books and furniture polish. In the study, everything was exactly as grandmother had left it. Her reading glasses still sat on the desk next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. I ran my fingers along the spines of her beloved books, remembering all the hours we'd spent here together. I miss you, I whispered to the empty room. I wish you could see this. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mr. Liu. Quarterly statements sent. Expect contact within 24 hours. I smiled, settling into grandmother's favorite armchair. The wait wouldn't be long now. Just then, I heard a car screech to a halt outside. Footsteps pounded up the front steps, followed by the sound of someone pounding on the door. Olivia, Rachel's voice, shrill with panic. Open this door right now. We need to talk. I stayed where I was, listening as Daniel's voice joined hers. The accounts are empty, he was saying. Everything's gone. How could this happen? Nothing's gone. I called through the door, loud enough for them to hear. It was never there to begin with. The pounding stopped. A moment of silence, then Rachel's voice again, quieter now. What are you talking about? Maybe you should ask your fiancé about due diligence, I replied. About checking the real value of what you thought you were stealing before spending money you didn't have. Another silence followed by the sound of hurried whispers. I could imagine them out there, their perfect world crumbling around them. Olivia, please, Daniel's voice now, using that gentle tone he'd always used when trying to manipulate me. Let's discuss this like adults. I'm sure we can work something out. I stood up, walking to the front door but not opening it. Like we discussed things when you were sleeping with my sister. Or like we discussed things when you lied in court about my mental health. That was a mistake, he stammered. We never meant to get caught, I finished for him. To face consequences. Well, too bad, because that's exactly what's about to happen. The fallout was swift and devastating. Within hours of their discovery that the accounts were empty, Rachel and Daniel's carefully constructed world began to unravel. I sat in grandmother's study, watching through the window as they argued on the front lawn. Rachel was gesturing wildly, her perfect makeup streaked with tears, while Daniel paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair in frustration. My phone lit up with a message from Mr. Liu. The bank is requesting an immediate meeting regarding the recent expenditures. Shall I arrange it? Yes, I replied, and make sure all relevant parties are present. The next morning, I walked into the downtown branch of First National Bank dressed in one of grandmother's vintage Channel suits. Rachel and Daniel were already there, along with their lawyer and Catherine. They all looked up when I entered, their faces a mix of anger, fear, and desperation. Now that everyone's here, the bank manager began, we need to discuss the irregular activities on these accounts. Rachel's lawyer leaned forward. My clients were granted access to these accounts through a court order. Everything was legal. The court order, I interrupted, placing grandmother's journal on the table, was obtained through fraudulent evidence that we can now prove was manipulated. The next hour was excruciating for them. Mr. Liu methodically laid out every detail, the doctored photos, the false testimonies, the carefully orchestrated character assassination they used to gain control of what they thought was grandmother's fortune. The real estate alone, Mr. Liu concluded, the properties they've leveraged for loans. None of it was actually in the accounts they accessed. Those assets are held in a separate trust, one that requires both sisters' consent for any transactions. Daniel's face had turned an interesting shade of gray, but the money we spent was essentially credit extended by the bank based on assets you didn't actually control. The bank manager finished, which means those loans are now in default. Rachel's perfectly manicured nails dug into the conference table. This is ridiculous. Olivia's just trying to hurt us because she's jealous Daniel chose me and she can't handle it. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the designer clothes and expensive jewelry, I saw what grandmother must have seen. A desperate woman so focused on taking what others had that she never built anything of her own. No, Rachel, I said quietly. This isn't about jealousy. It's about justice, about consequences. Grandmother knew what you were capable of, both of you. She planned for this. What do you mean? Catherine asked, speaking for the first time. I opened the journal to a marked page. This is grandmother's real will, her real intentions. Everything of value was placed in a trust before she died, with specific conditions. I looked directly at Rachel. She knew you'd try to take it all. She wanted to see what you'd do, how far you'd go. And now what? Daniel demanded. You're going to take everything, leave us with nothing. No, I replied. I'm going to do what grandmother would have wanted. I pulled out a document Mr. Liu had prepared. If you both sign this confession admitting to your fraud and manipulation, the trust will help pay off the debts you've incurred. Rachel's lawyer started to object, but she cut him off. And if we don't sign, then the bank proceeds with fraud charges and all the evidence of your deception goes public. Your choice. The silence in the room was deafening. Catherine was the first to speak. Sign it, she said to Daniel, her voice tight with disappointment. Sign it and be grateful your grandmother's granddaughter has more mercy than either of you deserve. One by one they signed. Rachel's hand shook so badly she could barely write her name. Daniel wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. When it was done, Mr. Liu collected the documents and nodded to me. There's one more thing, I said, standing. The ring. Rachel's hand instinctively covered the diamond, but it belonged to grandmother. It was never hers to take. Slowly, reluctantly, she slipped it off and placed it on the table. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. Grandmother told me once that this ring wasn't just about value. I said, turning it in my hand. It was about legacy, about the kind of person you choose to be. She wore it for 50 years, building a life based on integrity and wisdom. You both could have learned from her example.